Welcome back to Two Hearts, where stories are weaved to explore the beauty of diverse cultures and the depths of human connection. When Avery James realizes that she and her partner in love and business no longer see eye to eye, she does what any brilliant computer scientist would do. She codes a new life. Leaving Silicon Valley behind, Avery is determined to rebuild from the ashes of her greatest success and most painful failure. Finding solace after a chance encounter in a literal misunderstanding, Avery falls into the arms of a man whose calculated approach to life both intrigues and reawakens her. But just as she begins to believe in love again, her past resurfaces, demanding a do-over or to destroy what remains of her. Will ambition and jealous schemes weave a web of deception to snare them, or can a burgeoning relationship between Avery and Carlos bypass the betrayal that may be encoded into its very foundation? Please enjoy The Code Between Us. And as always, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe so that more members of our community continue to find content like this.
Avery James stood before the panoramic window of their San Francisco office, the city's twinkling lights a testament to how far they'd come. 10 years ago, she and Hunter Sloan had been just two ambitious college students with a revolutionary idea, creating subscription-based content libraries that would transform how educational institutions accessed digital resources. Now, their company, Nexus Collections, was valued at over $50 million, with clients ranging from Ivy League universities to international learning institutions. Still marveling at the view? Hunter's arms wrapped around her waist from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder, her body fitting snugly against the contours of his. Hunter's cologne, sandalwood and bergamot, filled her senses as it always did, a comforting familiarity that had become the backdrop to their shared success. "Just thinking about how we got here," Avery replied, leaning back into his embrace. "Remember that cramped dorm room at Stanford? You coding on one side, me designing algorithms on the other, surviving on nothing but peanut butter and jelly and ambition." Hunter chuckled, his lips pressing into her temple, his breath warm against her ear. "And now look at us. We did it, Avery." "We did," she agreed, though a nagging feeling had begun creeping in lately. As they'd excelled academically, then pivoted into professional success, something between them had shifted, not dramatically, just enough that she noticed the subtle changes in how people interacted with them, especially Hunter's family and the investors, none of whom looked like her, that they courted. Concerning Hunter's parents, while they had always been polite enough, their smiles always seemed obligatory and practiced when aimed at Avery. They'd never treated her poorly or explicitly expressed that she wasn't good enough for their son, but they didn't have to. Their homogeneous, carefully curated social circles, where Avery was always the only black person in attendance, made it painstakingly clear. "Your mother called earlier," Avery mentioned casually, intentionally withholding the bite from her words. "She asked if we'd be available for the annual charity gala next month." Hunter's arms tightened almost imperceptibly. "What did you tell her?" "That we'd check our schedules." "Hunter, do you ever wish, do you think your parents will ever truly accept me?" Avery hadn't meant to blurt out the question, but her quiet reflection, despite all her successes and accolades, had her feeling a little insecure. He turned her around to face him, his blue eyes earnest. "Of course they accept you. They just come from a different time and have had to unlearn a few things, but they know how much I love you and how much you've contributed to our success." Avery forced a smile, though the unease remained. Hunter had always been her champion, defending their partnership against anyone who suggested that they were on different trajectories, but lately, even his reassurances felt less certain. "Maybe I'm just anxious about the meeting," she offered, although her intuition wasn't quite aligned with that rationale. "It's going to be just fine," he assured as he kissed her gently on the lips. "You'll see." The next morning, they met with potential investors from Apex Capital Ventures. Avery presented their expansion plans with her usual brilliance, her mind sharp and focused, despite the 3 sets of eyes that kept darting between her and Hunter, as if trying to solve a puzzle. Afterward, the lead investor, Richard Sterling, pulled Hunter aside while Avery gathered her materials. She couldn't hear their conversation, but she caught the speculative glance Sterling cast in her direction before leading Hunter into a private office. "Hey, Mr. Sterling is unclear on a few things. Why don't I meet you back at the office in about 30 minutes? Hunter had come over when he noticed her watching the men. "What does he need clarity on, and why wouldn't he ask us both?" Avery asked, alarm bells going off. "Just some questions about the business's value proposition and additional monetization opportunities," he explained away easily. "And are you kidding me? You know Mr. Sterling is intimidated by you," Hunter whispered, and they laughed quietly. They'd both noticed how the direct and somewhat arrogant man began to stutter any time he questioned Avery's results or asked a clarifying question that she'd easily knocked out of the park. Still, unease coiled in Avery's stomach. Despite the man's inferiority complex, the idea of a private meeting with half of Nexus Collections just didn't sit right with her. "Okay, I'll see you back at the office." That evening, Sarai and Maya joined Avery and Hunter for dinner at their favorite restaurant, a cozy Italian place where the friend group had celebrated every major milestone. "I swear you two get more powerful every time I see you," Sarai said after taking a healthy sip of her wine. "Soon you'll be running the entire tech world." Maya nodded in agreement. "Remember when we used to study together, wondering if we'd make it? Now look at us. Lawyers, scientists, and tech moguls." Hunter laughed, reaching for Avery's hand across the table. "We couldn't have done it without each other." Avery smiled, but her mind was elsewhere. Later that night, while Hunter slept, she logged into their shared server and accessed the meeting calendar. There it was, a private meeting with Apex Capital Ventures that Hunter had scheduled without mentioning it to her. It had been pre-arranged, not the impromptu Q&A session he had made it out to be when he'd returned to the office and she'd asked him a throng of questions. The discovery left her cold, but she pushed the worry aside. Hunter had always been trustworthy, always had her back. There had to be an explanation. 2 weeks later, the funding they desperately needed for the final phase of their software development fell through. Hunter broke the news over dinner, his expression carefully neutral. "Apex decided not to move forward," he said, not meeting her eyes. "Something about market conditions." Avery's heart sank. They needed this funding to complete their proprietary content management system, the feature that would set them apart from competitors. Did they give any specific feedback? "Just general concerns," Hunter replied, his attention suddenly focused on his phone. The funder loss set into motion a chasm that slowly started to spread between them. Working late on system contingencies became the new normal, and although Hunter and Avery still saw one another every day, they were becoming less and less present. The distance between them only grew as the weeks passed. Hunter became more withdrawn, working late and attending networking events without her. When Avery tried to discuss the funding rejection, he changed the subject or claimed he was too tired. The breaking point came during a visit to her former mentor, Dean Livingston, at his office on campus. "I've been stumped by this potential design flaw for weeks," Avery admitted, showing him her code on her laptop. "The content indexing system seems to have a vulnerability that could cause catastrophic failure if not addressed." The aged Dean peered at her screen through his glasses. "Interesting. Let me see." He worked alongside her for hours, his expertise helping her identify the issue, a recursive loop in the metadata processing that could trigger system-wide crashes under certain conditions. They had worked non-stop on the corrective action, so neither had noticed dusk rolling in behind the setting sun. "My goodness, it's nearly 7, the older man proclaimed as he looked at his watch. "Oh my gosh, I am so sorry, Dean Livingston. I didn't mean to hold you hostage for this long," Avery laughed embarrassedly. "You always did take advantage of my office hours, now didn't you?" he laughed back, before looking at her with pride. "Would you care to join me for dinner at my club? It's not far." She hesitated, then agreed. The exclusive Pacifica Ridge Country Club was Hunter's family's territory, but she hadn't seen Hunter in days and she needed to unwind. Avery wasn't a stranger to the posh atmosphere of the club. She'd been enough times with Hunter to not be a stranger to the service staff and regulars, but she still walked deliberately slower and stood a little taller every time she was there. She and Dean Livingston had gotten halfway through their meal and were in an engaging conversation about the rise of 5D crystal data storage before Avery finally spotted him. Hunter sat with his parents, Richard Sterling from Apex Capital Ventures, and a stunning brunette whose hand rested intimately on Hunter's arm as he leaned toward her, laughing at something she'd said. Avery's breath caught. Hunter's hand was positioned comfortably on the back of the brunette's chair, a gesture so familiar that it made her stomach lurch. Dean Livingston followed her gaze, his expression softening with understanding. "Are you all right, my dear?" I'm suddenly not feeling so well," Avery managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "We can leave," the dean offered gently. No, you stay. I just need to get out of here. Get some air." When Avery refused his empathy, Dean Livingston placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Avery, listen to me. You are a trailblazer. Brilliant. One of the best students I've ever had. You deserve better than scraps from anyone's table. Go build your own table." The next day, Hunter showed up to her apartment, his expression uncharacteristically nervous. "We need to talk." He barely got his perfunctory greeting and kiss out before stating the obvious. Avery's heart pounded. "About what, Hunter?" She feigned ignorance. "Listen, Avery, I've been wanting to discuss something important with you," he began, pacing her living room. "Discuss what exactly? How you took a meeting with Richard Sterling behind my back? About how Apex Capital offered you funding if you bought me out?" Hunter froze. "How did you—" "I saw you at the country club," she cut in, her voice shaking with anger. "With your family, that investor, and some brunette whose hands you didn't bother keeping off you." "Avery, it wasn't what it looked like," he started, but Avery wasn't having it. "What do you think it looked like, Hunter? Because from where I sat, it looked like you were already moving on without me," she choked out. Their argument escalated, words flying like debris in a storm. When Hunter finally produced a buyout contract, already prepared, Avery's anger turned to cold fury. "You are unbelievable, Hunter. You came here to break up with me while offering to buy me out of the company we built together?" she yelled. "Get out of my house." Hunter looked genuinely hurt. "I'm sorry, Avery. I love you, but this is for the best." "Who are you to decide what is for the best?" Avery screamed. "The assets are divided fairly. You'll be taken care of," he stated, as if he wasn't callously ripping out her heart. "Get out," Avery reiterated, her rage barely contained. Hunter moved as if he were going to embrace her, but thought better of it when he saw the cold expression on her face. Stepping away from her instead, he left the contract on her coffee table. As he turned and reached the door, she called after him. "You know, Richard Sterling and his team initially approached me first with an individual partnership offer." "You're lying," he said, slightly thrown by the revelation. "Ask him. The difference is I turned them down because I would have never betrayed you that way." Hunter's flinch was visible. Once the door closed, Avery collapsed onto her sofa, her tears finally breaking free. For 2 days, she did nothing but cry. Then slowly, piece by piece, she began to gather herself. She'd texted her girls to tell them that things were over with Hunter. Confused by the cryptic message, they'd told her they'd be right over. When Sarai and Maya arrived, Avery showed them the contract. "I want a clean break," she insisted, her voice firm despite her red-rimmed eyes. "I want to break his face," Maya seethed, hugging her friend. "No, Maya, my expertise is in contracts, not criminal law," Sarai chastised half-heartedly. Turning back to her distraught friend, Sarai hesitated. "Avery, baby, are you sure? This gives you no claim to future proceeds." "I'm sure," Avery replied, All I want is my research, my intellectual property, and the current valuation of my half. That's it, Avery reiterated. And the future of Nexus? Sarai asked seriously. Good luck to him. He'll need it. I was always the brains of the operation anyway. Her friends laughed, but they saw the determination in her eyes. After hugging her fiercely and letting her get all of her emotions out, Sarai promised to modify the contract with the IP protections and revisions she'd asked for. Days began to blur together as Avery contended with the devastation caused by the loss of the identity she tied to her relationship and her career. Feeling unsettled and having nothing tethering her to life in the Bay, on a whim, Avery boarded a plane to Spain, determined to escape the suffocating memories of San Francisco. The beautiful city of Valencia greeted her with golden sunlight and winding streets that promised anonymity. 3 days into her trip, after warding off jet lag and establishing the lay of the land, Avery found herself starving one evening. Making her way to a well-reviewed but bustling tapas bar, she'd been squeezed between strangers at the communal counter. The discomfort at having no personal space almost made her leave, but she realized that in her current mindset, she really didn't want to spend another day alone. Drawing in a deep breath, Avery took in the sights, sounds, and smells of the otherwise inviting Spanish restaurant. Observing her surroundings, she began noticing the diverse people all around her. Turning slightly, her eyes leisurely perused the man beside her. He exuded an effortless confidence. Rich brown skin, sharp features, and an expensive watch that suggested success. "Busy night?" she ventured in English, assuming from his stylish appearance and common characteristics that he was American. The man turned, his hypnotically dark eyes questioning. "I'd venture that this place is just as crowded as Chiquette in Chelsea or Casadani in Century City," she continued, sure that this unknown yet familiar stranger had been to at least one of the elevated dining establishments. "Lo siento, señora, no sé de qué hablas." "I'm sorry, ma'am, I don't know what you're talking about." Realizing her egregious faux pas belatedly, Avery's face reddened in embarrassment. It had taken some time, but after optimal effort on her part, Avery had stumbled through a rusty but adequate Spanish apology. "Don't worry about it." The man switched to perfect English before chuckling good-naturedly. "May I buy you a drink?" Humiliated but thankful for the out, Avery accepted his offer and introduced herself. As they conversed, she learned that Carlos Saavedra was also in tech and was born and raised in Madrid, though he was also Dominican. When she apologized again for her overconfident assumption about his nationality, he smiled. "Although you were wrong in assuming that I'm an American, it doesn't negate the fact that I am, in fact, black," he said gently. "I am quite happy for the confirmation," Avery said affably, and they both laughed. Their conversation flowed easily, aided by wine and the tapas bar's lively atmosphere. Avery found herself sharing her recent heartbreak, while Carlos revealed he was in Valencia for business. When she'd harmlessly pressed to know what type of business, he shared that a mathematics background had led him to venture capital investing, particularly in biotech and skincare startups. "A skincare startup? My best friend, Maya, just launched her own line. She's a pharmaceutical scientist turned cosmetic creator." Carlos's eyes lit up. "Small world. What's the name of her company?" "Radiant Labs," Avery replied, surprised. "I've heard of it. Excellent formulations. The vitamin C serum is particularly innovative." "I'll let her know that you think so." The connection felt like a sign, a tiny thread pulling them together in this foreign place. For the next 2 weeks, Valencia became their playground. They explored the city of arts and sciences, its futuristic structures gleaming under the Spanish sun, and lost themselves in the labyrinthine streets of the Old Town. Their conversations ranged from coding algorithms to the nuances of Caribbean Spanish, from the pain of betrayal to the thrill of building something from nothing. Avery found herself drawn to Carlos's intellect and his quiet confidence. He listened, truly listened, when she spoke about her work, his eyes lighting up with understanding as she explained complex software concepts. Unlike Hunter, who had always been supportive but occasionally dismissive of the technical details he felt he already knew, Carlos engaged with her ideas, challenging her and pushing her to think deeper. One evening, as they watched the sunset from a rooftop bar, Carlos turned to her. "What will you do when you return to the States?" Avery sighed, swirling the remnants of her sangria. "Start over, I guess. Find a new city, rebuild my career." "Have you considered starting over overseas?" he asked softly. When he leaned in close and she did not pull away, he slowly pressed his lips to hers. The question and the kiss caught her off guard. After Hunter's betrayal, the thought of tying her life to another man, any man, felt like a risk she wasn't willing to take. "I don't know," she admitted breathlessly. "I need to find my footing first." Carlos nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Then we'll keep in touch, and if it's meant to be, it will be." Back in the U.S., Sarai had already delivered the revised contract. Though she now hated his guts, Hunter had been true to his word. All of Avery's intellectual property was protected, and the buyout reflected her true contribution to Nexus Libraries. With a heavy heart, Avery signed, officially severing ties with her ex and the company they'd built together. For the next few months, Avery drifted. She gave notice on her San Francisco apartment, packed her life into boxes, and set off to explore different cities. Austin, Chicago, Boston. Each offered possibility, but none felt quite right. Through it all, she and Carlos maintained their connection, their long-distance conversations growing more intimate, more vulnerable. When Carlos announced he had business in New York, Avery arranged to be there too. Their reunion was electric, the chemistry between them undeniable. It had been their last night in town, and they were both looking forward to dinner and a little dancing. It had been over Asian fusion cuisine at a chic Manhattan restaurant that the buzzing of Avery's phone with a notification had disrupted their peace. When she glanced down at the device, she immediately froze. "Hunter Sloan secures $100 million in VC funding," the headline read. Below it, a photo of Hunter and the brunette from the country club, now identified as Evelyn Reed, daughter of tech mogul Winston Reed, accompanied the headline with an announcement of their engagement. The room tilted. Avery's breath hitched, and suddenly the vibrant restaurant noise faded to a dull roar. "Avery?" Carlos noticed her distress immediately and carefully deposited his linen napkin onto the table. I, she stammered as her hands shook violently. "The ex?" Carlos's voice cut through the haze with both curiosity and understanding after glancing down briefly at her phone. She looked up, tears blurring her vision. "I'm sorry," she whispered, embarrassed by her reaction and not knowing how to explain it after so much time had passed. Carlos reached across the table, his hand covering her shaking one. "Don't be." He stood, rounded the table, and pulled her into a gentle embrace right there in the middle of the restaurant. As she cried quietly against his shoulder, he held her, offering comfort without question or judgment. When she finally composed herself, he tilted her chin up, his dark eyes full of concern. "Better?" She nodded, managing a weak smile. "Sorry for the emotional display." "Don't apologize." He leaned closer, touching his lips to hers. In that moment, the kiss was a soothing balm, but all too quickly he pulled away. "This may not be the time to tell you this, Avery." "Tell me what?" she whispered. "That despite knowing you clearly are not ready, I still want more with you," he stated distinctly. "Carlos." "But I don't want to be your rebound," he continued delicately. His honesty disarmed her. "I understand, and eventually, I think I'd like more with you as well," she replied softly, then continued after a long pause. "Can we take things slowly?" He smiled, relief washing over his features. "Slowly sounds perfect." The seasons had changed when Avery finally found herself in Seattle. The city's tech scene was thriving, its natural beauty inspiring. With her buyout money well invested and a clear vision underfoot, she launched James Development, specializing in business-to-business custom software tools. Within months, she'd secured 3 major clients and was making a name for herself in Pacific Northwest tech circles. Her personal life with Carlos blossomed, too. He flew to Seattle twice a month, their weekends filled with curling up on her couch, exploring Pike Place Market, hiking in the Cascade Mountains, and long dinners where they talked about everything and nothing. Their relationship deepened through shared experiences and late-night video calls when distance kept them apart. A year after her move and once she'd fully settled in, Sarai and Maya visited. It happened to be a week when Carlos was in town, and the 3 women finally met him over dinner at Canillas, the iconic restaurant overlooking Lake Union. "So," Sarai began over cocktails, her attorney directness in full force, "what are your intentions with our friend?" Carlos laughed, completely unfazed. "My intentions are to make her as happy as she deserves to be." Maya, ever the scientist, pivoted and grilled him about his investment philosophy and technical background. Avery watched, her heart swelling as Carlos held his own, his intelligence and charm winning over her protective friends. Later that night, after Carlos had chivalrously escorted the women home, they gathered around Avery's coffee table with wine and a terrible romantic comedy. During the credits, Sarai brought up Hunter. "He's been asking about you," she mentioned casually. Avery tensed. "And?" "Just asking. Wants to see you." "I want nothing to do with him," Avery firmly said. "Please don't tell him anything about me." "We won't," Maya promised. "But are you really okay, after all this time?" Avery considered the question. "I am. Carlos has been healing. But I'd be lying if I didn't admit that Hunter needs to stay in my past." 2 months later, Avery stood backstage at the Moscone Center in San Francisco, having just delivered the keynote address at the Future of Tech conference. Her presentation on adaptive content management systems had been well received, with the Q&A session engaging but not overly challenging. As she gathered her notes, the event coordinator, Karen Marsh, burst in. "Avery, fantastic keynote. We have a special guest who'd love to see you. Hunter Sloan is here." Avery's stomach dropped. "Hunter's here?" "He's one of our major investors," Karen explained cheerfully. "I'll bring him back." He was also her ex-boyfriend, a fact that, though not universally known, was common knowledge in many tech circles. Before Avery could protest, the door opened and Hunter stepped inside. The years had been kind to him. He looked handsome, successful, and confident, exactly the Silicon Valley golden boy he'd always been destined to become. "Karen, could you give us a moment?" Avery asked, her voice tight. As the bubbly coordinator exited, Hunter closed the door partially. "Avery, you were incredible up there." "What do you want, Hunter?" she asked, her tone cold and direct. He flinched slightly. "Can't I just congratulate an old friend?" "We haven't been friends for a long time," she reminded him. His shoulders slumped. "I know, and that's my fault," he admitted. "It's all your fault," she parroted, although her expression held one of surprise at his uncharacteristic candor. "Avery, I've been lonely since you left, unfocused, disconnected." Avery laughed bitterly. "You're engaged to be married in 3 months. I'm sure that will alleviate your loneliness." The barb hit its mark. Hunter looked genuinely hurt. "My parents always liked and respected you, you know." "They had a funny way of showing it," she shot back. "But that's not why you're here. What do you want, Hunter?" "Is there a chance that we might—" "There's no way in hell," she cut him off, her voice measured, although rage at his audacity slowly bubbled just below the surface. This man had ripped out her heart and sacrificed it on the altar of ambition, and now wanted to know if she'd wanted a second helping? "We were good together, Avery, in every way," he stated suggestively, moving into her personal space. "Hunter, don't," she bit out when he reached up to caress her cheek. But it was never just your body for me, he continued as if she hadn't said anything. You are the smartest person I know. How you process, your analytical mind, it's a thing of beauty. You came here to tell me what I already know? She lobbed, attempting to imbue herself with a modicum of the confidence he'd systematically stripped from her during their breakup and business dissolution. He hesitated, then cleared his throat. I need your help with a coding anomaly. The system keeps crashing and I can't figure out why. Avery almost laughed. The recursive loop in the metadata processing. She and Dean Livingston had solved that almost 2 years ago. If Hunter hadn't pushed her out, she would have implemented the patch then. Now it was beyond her capacity to care. I'm not available for consulting, she stated flatly. Name your price, he pressed. This is important, Avery. She shook her head. Find someone else. Hunter's expression shifted, becoming calculating. Is this because of him, Carlos Saavedra? Avery froze. How do you know about Carlos? I make it my business to know about the people within my sphere of influence, Hunter replied, a hint of his old arrogance returning. Carlos is beyond your sphere of influence, Avery said. An unconscious smile touched her lips at the mere mention of his name. Hunter noticed. He's wealthy and connected in biotech. Are you using him to fund your new venture? However did you figure me out? Avery asked, sarcastically, as she rolled her eyes and pushed past him. Just then, the door opened wider and Carlos stepped inside, a bouquet of roses in hand. The expression on his face made it clear to Avery that he must have heard her last comment and misunderstood its context in the worst possible way. Surprise, he said, his voice cool. He extended the flowers to Avery, who hurried over and rose on her toes to kiss him. Carlos turned slightly, presenting his cheek instead. Hunter stepped forward and offered his hand. Hunter Sloan. The unscrupulous ex? Carlos feigned curiosity. If his expression hadn't looked like he wanted to breathe fire, Avery would have laughed out loud. I was a significant part of Avery's life for 10 years, Hunter replied, self-importantly, but the comment fell flat. Carlos's eyes narrowed. Were you now? The tension in the small room grew and became suffocating. Avery could feel the misunderstanding building like a storm cloud. Carlos, it's not what you think, she started, but he cut her off. What should I think, Avery? That you weren't just outlining your plan of financial manipulation to your little boyfriend? He asked, his voice low. Wait, you can't believe that, Carlos, Avery replied, shocked by his venom. Was I a placeholder to get back at him, to fund your revenge? He continued. That's not fair, she protested, hurt lancing through her. Hunter watched the exchange, a flicker of something, triumph in his eyes. Maybe I should go. No, Carlos said, his voice dangerously quiet. Stay. I think we all need to understand exactly what's been happening here. Avery looked from Hunter's smug expression to Carlos's hurt eyes, trapped between the man who had broken her heart and the man who was helping her to heal it. The air crackled with unspoken words and dangerous misinterpretations, and suddenly the future she'd been building felt as fragile as glass. Carlos, please, Avery pleaded, her voice trembling. What you heard was you admitting to using me, right? He finished, his eyes dark with pain. After everything we've built, is that all this is to you? A strategic maneuver? That's not what I said, Avery insisted, her frustration mounting. I was being sarcastic with Hunter because he's jealous and incompetent and accused me of exactly that. Hunter watched them, an almost smug satisfaction on his face. Everything Avery does is strategic and with intention. Have you met her friend Maya yet? A cosmetics founder with a background in pharmaceutical science. Interesting coincidence, wouldn't you say? The comment hung in the air, poisonously sweet. Hunter had gotten everything he'd wanted and left Avery high and dry. Why was he doing this? Avery turned on him, her anger finally breaking through. Don't you dare stand there and act like you didn't orchestrate every bit of this. The irony that you would come here and beg for my help, then assassinate my character, all while you went about aligning our breakup and my removal from a company I helped to build with your overlapping engagement is especially deplorable. Hunter's expression faltered. I loved you. I never wanted... You never wanted what? You never loved me. You just loved the idea of me. And if we're being completely honest, outside of the protective walls of Stanford, you likely never wanted to be seen with the black girl who built the empire you actively erased her from, right? What, and have investors wonder who was really the catalyst behind our success? Carlos stepped between them, facing Hunter. Now, I think you should leave. Hunter looked from Avery's furious face to Carlos's imposing stance. Fine, but Avery, when you realize that some things work better together, you know where to find me. The door closed behind them, leaving Avery and Carlos in the suffocating silence of the backstage room. Is that true? Carlos asked quietly. Did he really force you out? Avery sank onto the nearby sofa, the adrenaline leaving her suddenly weak. He took a meeting behind my back with investors who offered him funding if he bought me out. They told him I was risk-averse and would stifle the trajectory of the business. Carlos sat beside her, his posture rigid. And you didn't tell me?
No, why would I? At the time, you and I had only just met. I was trying to move on, she whispered. I didn't want that poison touching what we had.
He stood abruptly, running a hand over his hair. And when I heard you ask him how he'd figured out your plan, what was I supposed to think? That you knew me better than that I was being sarcastic, Avery insisted, tears of frustration welling. The fact that Hunter would show up here to seek my help and then accuse me of using you for money was peak imbecilic behavior. I was mocking him for it. Carlos paced the small room, his internal conflict visible in every tense line of his body. This is complicated. Is it? Avery challenged, rising to face him. Or are you just looking for an out? He stopped, turning to face her fully. I'm not running, Avery. I'm processing whether the woman I've fallen in love with might have been using me as revenge against the man who broke her heart. The words hung between them. The woman I've fallen in love with. Despite the tension, despite the misunderstanding, Avery's heart leapt at his confession. I'm not using you, she said softly, approaching him slowly. What I feel for you has nothing to do with Hunter. Carlos watched her approach,
his expression unreadable. Then what does it have to do with? It has to do with the way you listen when I talk about code, she said, now standing before him. The way you challenge my ideas and respect my intelligence. The way you make me feel seen, not as the black woman in the room, not as someone's ex, but as Avery. His shoulders relaxed slightly. And what about Hunter? An expletive hung on the tip of her tongue, but she swallowed it. What about him? Avery replied. He's my past. You're my present. I hope you're my future. Carlos reached out, his fingers tracing the line of her jaw. I want to be. I want you to be. The tension between them shifted from painful to electric. His thumb brushed her lower lip, and Avery's breath hitched. But we need to be honest with each other, he continued, his voice low. No more secrets, no half-truths. No more secrets, she agreed, her eyes locked on his. I promise. His lips met hers then, tentative at first, then deepening with the weight of their unspoken feelings. The kiss was both apology and acceptance, a sealing of promises without words. When they finally parted, Avery rested her forehead against his. I know it's not the Ritz, but will you come spend the rest of the weekend with me? I wouldn't be anywhere else. Wait, where are you staying? He raised a quizzical brow. They put me up at the Four Seasons, she grinned knowingly. Shoot, I'll have my assistant to cancel my reservation right now, Carlos said, pulling out his phone as Avery laughed. The next morning, Avery woke to sunlight streaming through her hotel room curtains and Carlos's arm draped protectively around her waist. The events of the previous day felt like a distant storm that had passed, leaving clarity in its wake. "Morning," he murmured against her hair, his voice still thick with sleep. "Morning," she replied, turning to face him. "About yesterday." "We don't need to rehash it," Carlos interrupted gently. "We start fresh today. No secrets, remember?" She nodded, relief washing over her. No secrets. His phone buzzed on the nightstand. Carlos glanced at it, his expression shifting. "I have to take this. Business." As he stepped onto the balcony to take the call, Avery's own phone buzzed with a text from Sarai. "Saw Hunter at the conference. Everything okay?" Avery replied, "More than okay. He came to start trouble, but Carlos and I worked things out." When Carlos returned, his expression was thoughtful. "That was interesting. Everything all right?" "Better than all right," he replied, sitting on the edge of the bed. "That was one of my colleagues. Apparently, Hunter Sloan has been making inquiries about my investment portfolio." Avery raised an eyebrow. "What kind of inquiries?" "Specifically about whether I'd be interested in funding a certain software development company, one that seems to be having some technical difficulties." Avery couldn't help but laugh. "He's still trying to solve that recursive loop problem, isn't he?" Carlos joined her laughter. "It appears so. My colleague mentioned that Hunter seemed particularly interested in whether I had any personal connection to his former partner." Which was likely the true impetus of his visit yesterday. Avery rolled her eyes in disgust. "Likely. Well, what did your colleague say?" "That I did, and that I was extremely protective of my own interests." Avery leaned in to kiss him. "Good, because you are." The following months brought a new level of commitment to their relationship. Carlos began spending more time in Seattle, eventually leasing a penthouse overlooking Elliott Bay. Their professional lives intertwined too, Carlos becoming an informal advisor to James' development, his insights helping Avery secure even larger clients. 6 months after the San Francisco conference, Carlos invited Avery to Madrid. "I want you to see where I grew up," he explained over a video call. "Meet my family." The trip was everything she hadn't known she needed. Carlos's mother, Dinah, welcomed her with open arms, while Carlos's father, Omar, regaled her with stories of Carlos's childhood. They didn't acknowledge ethnicity or catalog cultural barriers. They only saw the woman their son loved. One evening, as they strolled through the Retiro Park, Carlos stopped before the lake. "There's something I need to tell you," he began, his uncharacteristic nervousness making Avery's heart race. "What is it?" He took a deep breath. "I've been offered a position as managing partner of a new venture capital fund based in Seattle." Avery's eyes widened. "Carlos, that's incredible." "It would mean relocating permanently," he continued, "making Seattle my home base, our home base." Tears welled in her eyes. "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" Carlos dropped to one knee, pulling a small velvet box from his jacket. "Avery James, you've rebuilt your empire with your brilliance and resilience. You've healed my heart with your strength and your love. Will you let me spend the rest of my life building ours with you?" "Yes," she whispered through tears. "Yes, of course, yes." As he slid the diamond ring onto her finger, Avery thought back to that painful day at the country club, to Dean Livingston's words about building her own table. She had done exactly that, created a beautiful life and viable career on her own terms, and now she had found someone who didn't just want a seat at her table, but wanted to build an even bigger one with her. Their wedding took place on a bluff overlooking the Puget Sound, with Sarai and Maya as maid of honor and bridesmaid. Hunter sent a gift, a crystal vase with a simple note of congratulations, which Avery acknowledged with civil indifference. As they danced their first dance as husband and wife,
Carlos whispered in her ear, "Who would have thought that a coding anomaly and a misunderstanding in a stuffy backstage room would lead us here?" Avery laughed, resting her head on his chest. "I think fate was always going to lead us here. We just had to get through the storm first." He tightened his embrace. "La tormenta ha pasado, mi amor. De ahora en adelante, todo irá bien." "The storm's over, my love. From here on out, it's smooth sailing." And as they swayed under the stars, surrounded by friends and family, Avery knew he was right. The code between them, complex, challenging, but ultimately beautiful, had been cracked. This was there forever, written not in lines of programming language, but in the unbreakable bonds of love, respect, and partnership.